This is Hannibal back here for another review of part two of Who Killed WCW. Part one was better overall. Part two, and I listened to Wrestling Observer Radio this morning, and I agree with Dave Meltzer. This was filled with a lot of bullshit. A lot of bullshit. And I said this at the start of Who Killed WCW Part One. I was a massive WCW fan. Overall, for whatever reason, I liked it better than WWE, and overall, I sure as hell like it better than anything there is now. There's some parts, some eras of WCW that I hated, but overall, I liked it better from the time it started until about the 2 years before it ended. I really didn't like those couple of years before it ended. But I was maybe it's because I was a kid, but I was still able to watch them, and maybe it's because it contained so many legends that I liked seeing guys like Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash and Goldberg so much that I was able to put aside the horrible booking at various times. But let's go into this. They talk in this about they weren't very excited about Thunder, and I've heard Kevin Sullivan also say it. It seems like they never really wanted to put in a full effort into Thunder. And apparently, the difference between WCW getting Thunder and not being excited, and AEW getting all these other shows like Collision and Rampage, which have watered down their product, but they're excited about it. They actually get more money for these other shows. WCW back in these days, it was before the days where TV stations were paying massive amounts of money for TV shows because streaming services as competition and YouTube didn't exist. So like they got nothing extra for Thunder. So it's basically we have to come up with more content for the same money, and nobody was apparently getting paid more. Did they put an effort into it? I don't think they put that much of an effort into it, but Nash made a comment saying it was impossible to have enough attention to detail to do a good job on Thunder. They one thing I will say, and again, I wasn't there in the thick of things, WWE has a different writing team for Raw and SmackDown. Did nobody think of hiring a different writing team or separating the brands so it's not like, for instance, Kevin Sullivan, who I think was the booker when Thunder started, having to now come up with double the amount of storylines? Of course, it's going to drain him. But yeah, they never seem to separate it, and they never put that much effort into Thunder beyond the first couple of episodes. They claimed that Eric Bischoff was hired for Thunder, or sorry, that Eric Bischoff hired Bret Hart for Thunder. Dave Meltzer brought up today, and Bret Hart has well documented this. It's in Wrestling with Shadows that the year before Thunder was created, they also made Bret Hart a very similar offer um, to be on WCW before Thunder even existed for around 3 million a year. According to Meltzer, he was getting 2 million a year from Turner Broadcasting and 800,000 from WCW. Bret Hart mentions in this he would often be flown to Thunder and not used. Keep in mind, this happens to a lot of AEW talent. A lot of them don't get flown in and just sit at home getting a paycheck. But I've heard numerous cases they're flown into these shows and then not used. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons that can be made of WCW to AEW other than WCW had a better overall run. As far as this whole Goldberg thing, one thing that I totally disagree with on this is saying that because of standards and practices, they couldn't compete with the raunchiness of WWE. I understand WWE got ahead of them with the raunchiness and the sex, the controversial angles, but you don't necessarily need that. Goldberg was over. Okay. I was a kid at that time. I was in high school. People had Goldberg shirts. Everyone watched Goldberg. Everyone talked about Goldberg. You killed your golden goose. Nash said in this, and I mean, I like Nash. I like Nash. I've wrestled him. Um, and I do think he's underrated overall as a wrestler. Terrible decision taking the title off Goldberg, beating him. He was full of steam. He still had a lot of steam left in him. He was over. You killed your golden goose by ending the streak. It just killed all of his momentum. It was brutal. There was no reason for it. The way you did it was awful. Goldberg, I mean, he was still popular in WWE when they brought him back friggin' 20 years later. But like, and if AEW had hired him and given him another streak, that's one of their stupid decisions. Instead of wasting all this money on all these New Japan guys nobody gives a crap about, why didn't you just hire Goldberg and have a whole streak in AEW? That would have got them over. But anyways, the other thing Nash said was baby faces are better chasing the titles than winning it. That might be the case for Cody Rhodes. He's definitely gone quite cold since winning the title in WWE. I was never a fan of his, but definitely people were more interested in him when he was chasing a bigger star like Roman Reigns or when he was working with The Rock. Now that he's the top guy, people are really losing interest. We're seeing ratings fall. Sellout streak is over in WWE. But you look at baby faces that have been over, like Bruno Sammartino, years and years champion. Bob Backlund, years and years champion. Hulk Hogan, years and years champion. Steve Austin was champion as a face. The Rock was champion as a face. Bret Hart was champion as a face. I mean, to say that like you can't be a successful babyface champion, maybe that was the case of Nash. Maybe he wasn't the most successful babyface champion himself, so maybe that's why he thinks that. But I'm telling you, anyone that says Goldberg needed to lose, I was a kid then, and I was a fan of Goldberg. Everyone at my school was fans of Goldberg. You fucking blew it. You blew it. See, now I can't even monetize this video because you made me swear. Because I'm still bitter to this day that you killed Goldberg's streak. So that I did not agree with. The finger poke of doom, that was a thing even and I remember in high school when that happened. I was just like, this is stupid. The way that they talk about it. Oh, and by the way, one last thing. Nash says they cheered him when he beat Goldberg. Of course, it's going to get a reaction. Everyone in the arena can always say they were there when the streak was broken. Got a reaction, but it was not good long term. I don't remember Kevin Nash having this great run after Goldberg's streak, and I honestly don't remember anything good about Goldberg in WCW after his streak ended. I remember the stupid thing where he punched the window out and there was blood everywhere and a bunch of horrible angles he was involved with, but the ball was dropped. The finger poke of doom was another horrible thing that they tried to say in this wasn't as bad as people thought, and they tried to defend it and act like you have a huge crowd in the Georgia Dome and doing a finger poke of doom in the main event is a good idea. I'm sorry, that sucked. That sucked. You spit on all your fans there with that. That's politics ruining the company. Too many people not wanting to do real jobs, and they decide on that. Um, what else did they talk about? Bret Hart whines in this about how much he was screwed. I mentioned this earlier today. You see Bret putting his hands up for the kick. So he said Goldberg said, "Watch the kick." If someone throws you against the ropes and says, "Watch the kick," usually means to be prepared for the kick. How many decades did Bret Hart wrestle before this? He did wrestle 10 matches in WCW after with a concussion, and he went on to become WWE United States champion and also beat Vince McMahon at WrestleMania in a horribly one-sided match. But the other thing that they never talked about in this was Bret Hart got a Lloyd's of London settlement, just like Nikita Koloff, Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig, Road Warrior Animal. There was an insurance policy that Bret Hart collected on for not being able to wrestle again. Would he have wrestled more had he not had this policy to collect on? Why don't people talk about that? Because they question everyone else's Lloyd's of London policy. Why don't they question Bret Hart's? Someone says Goldberg's comments felt like they were edited. Vice is great at editing. Yeah, they definitely are. They screwed me over with I did an interview with them for literally about 6 hours for the Abdullah the Butcher Dark Side of the Ring episode, and they definitely played a lot with the editing, 100%. Definitely. They have their narratives that they like to go with. Godson. You know what? Say what you want about Goldberg. He was over. And wrestling is a physical sport. If you get accidents happen, Bret Hart pile drove wrestlers Tom Stone on his head and stiffed him. Dynamite Kid was stiffed by Bret Hart. Bad News Brown was stiffed by Bret Hart. Stuff happens. You can whine about it for decades after. You can move on with your life and focus on the positives. Bret Hart will. Oh, here's the other funny thing. Conan saying Bret was a Canadian hero. Bret Hart's gimmick was he was a Canadian hero. He is not looked at as a Wayne. There's a lot of people that don't even like Bret Hart, like myself from Canada. I was never a fan of his. Honestly, I never was. I like Jim Neidhart better than Bret Hart, and I like the Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair. I didn't dislike Bret Hart, as in like I didn't like cringe at him until the constant whining started. But he's not a national hero where everybody in Canada knows who he is. He had a period of time when they were doing the Team Canada angle that was over. But when he was champion, they were not coming to the big arenas here in Ottawa. They were going across the river to the small minor hockey arena in Hull, Quebec that fit about 4,000. And some of the times they only got 900 in there when Brett was champion. So it's not like he was a national hero selling out the main arenas. Um, I'm not saying that he wasn't over, but the whole national hero thing, that's a gimmick. His Canadian fan, even Kevin Owens, who doesn't agree with me on everything, I've heard him say is a similar thing. We have different philosophies. We don't even like each other, but I think Kevin Owens and I could agree on that. Bret Hart is overrated. Definitely overrated. And not a national hero beloved by everybody. I'm sure people in Calgary are really proud of him because Stampede Wrestling was really over there. But like, it's not like he was selling out the major hockey arenas. The time he was champion, they were going to the smaller arenas. And if he was so over, why did WWE let him go? The doctor says G-Berg. Rob says Brett cried and bitched. That's all Brett does in every documentary. He made 3 million a year, and then he ended up getting a Lloyd's of London settlement. Then he ends up going back to WWE anyways, making a fortune for WrestleMania and getting tons of payoffs with them over the years. So I don't know, man. Someone does not agree. He thinks not the biggest star, but the top three workers ever. I don't know if he was the top three workers ever because the top three workers would be the top three draws. So you'd have to put Hulk Hogan as one of the top draws ever. You'd have to put Steve Austin and The Rock. Those, I mean, those are for my generation, the three top draws ever. You because you're good at pretending to fake fight doesn't mean you're over and doesn't mean you can draw a good crowd. I'm not saying Brett was horrible. The whining, his constant whining leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth because for God's sake, how long can we feel sorry for you, man? You're a multimillionaire. And you went back after bitching and when British Bulldog went to WWE, he publicly said British Bulldog was rolling around in dog shit and stuff like this, and then he ends up going back to WWE. So he took the money too in the end. And for a guy that claimed he had such great morals, in his book he talked about cheating on his wife constantly, and he also talked about using drugs, harsh drugs. So this whole Canadian hero, moral guy, he's not a good role model as far as cheating on your wife. Let's interview his ex-wife about that and see what she has to say about that being a good role model or talking about doing drugs. That do it like for instance, at least Bob Backlund, I will say this. I will say this for Bob Backlund, he was a good role model as far and even The Rock, you never hear anything bad about him. I don't claim to be a good role model. I really don't. But Brett did for a long time and said he was all about morals and blah 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 blah. Then you read his book, he's constantly cheating on his wife. Kevin Owens versus Hannibal. Well, since he's never actually been in a real fight, he backed down from both Jeremy Prophet and CM Punk, and I am much more experienced as a real fighter than him and much more decorated as an amateur competitor than him. Be a matter of seconds. Someone says it's kind of his charm that he takes himself so seriously. Yeah, you'd have to put Flair in one of the top draws for sure. 100%. Cena was a good draw, but not a top draw, but he was a good draw for a while. Bruno Sammartino was a great draw, but was before things were worldwide. Billy Graham holds this sellout record for most consecutive sellouts in Madison Square Garden, 19 out of 20. But if you go by today's sellouts, he would have sold out the 20th because the sellouts back in those days was like 23,000. Now they'll call an MSG sellout like 12,000 because they consider the blocked off seats sold out. And he would also sell out the felt form. But when you talk about top draws ever, yeah, you can't question that Flair's up there. I honestly don't think HBK was not known as a top draw, but definitely The Rock, Hogan, and Flair and Austin for the period he was hot. Bob Backlund had great matches with Evil Dwight. There you go. I mean, he wasn't a worldwide star, but he was successful as WWF champion. All right, guys, let me know what you thought in the comments. I would say it's interesting to watch as a WCW fan, but there was a lot of bullshit in this. But the biggest one, I'll tell you, it was not Goldberg's time to lose. They're trying to put that false narrative out there. He was as over as he ever was when they beat him. That was complete bullshit. Yes, there needs to be another new ECW type league, and I agree with you, the doctor, and hopefully as Great North Wrestling progresses with our first couple of shows, June 29th and August 31st, we will eventually uh, become an alternative product because I am not, first of all, my style is not like anything anyone does in these regular companies, and we're not corporate at all. And Jack Kilby is an old school guy. He needs to continue get experience promoting, and he would even tell you that. I was dealing with my own issues for his first bunch of events that have now all been resolved, so I can help him a lot more as time goes forward. So give this video a thumbs up. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments.